Hello, my name is Tej van Pettinger from Economics Help, and today I'd like to look at the experience effect, which is part of behavioral economics, and it explains why people may seem to act in a not particularly rational way. So supposing you were booked on a British Airways flight, but it was delayed by several hours. So you had a very bad experience with British Airways, and that has a very powerful impact on you not wanting to take that airline company again in the future. Some consumers may even say, I'm never flying with BA again, they were so bad. But if you are completely rational, then you may look at the industry average for flight delays and see that your personal experience was a bit of a statistical freak, and that when you compare British Airways to the other airlines, actually they all have pretty similar delays. So when making a decision on which airline to take, you should discount your bad luck of your personal experience in the past, but consider, which is the cheapest flight, which is the best flight for you, and put aside that personal experience. But in the real world, it can be very difficult to put our personal experiences to one side. So for example, if you have a friend in your family who dies of COVID, you may become very fearful that COVID is going to cause a very big negative effect on society, because you've seen how damaging it can be and your personal experience is very strong. At the same time, if you caught COVID but you didn't really feel particularly ill, you shrugged it off, you may think the whole thing is overblown, and why on earth would we have mask mandates and social distancing when I shrugged it off? So it can be hard to discount our personal experience and look at the statistical average. What's the rate of fatality for the average person in society? And the problem is that we value much more the personal experience that we live through. When a professional or expert says, the COVID fatality rate is 1.3%, and this can lead to 50,000 deaths or whatever the statistic is, but that is much more intangible, impersonal, and the actual experience that we have and maybe the people we know is much more real to us. So we tend to base our outlook on something from the actual personal experience we had. Another example is in investing. Supposing you lived through the Wall Street crash of 1929, the Great Depression, then researchers have found that changed people's perspective on buying shares for their whole lifetime. People who lived through the Wall Street crash were much less likely to buy shares in the future because they had that personal experience of a stock market crash. Whereas if you were born in boom times, if you lived through good periods of the stock market, then you become much more optimistic. And it can actually lead to a kind of irrational exuberance. Because we've never experienced a big crash, we think, or we don't think about it. So we just think the good times are going to continue, and we discount those bad times which we had no experience of. So the experience we've had, especially ones quite recently, can very much influence our thinking. And this can cause a lot of stock market bubbles, because if you've had an experience of, say, tulips always rising in price, like it did in the 17th century, you will get a very strong feeling that tulips are a good thing to invest in. And it can make us lose track of the bigger picture. Is this a good investment? Is the price of my investment worth the real value? And what it can mean is that we don't often want to listen to experts, and even professionals like central bankers. Their decisions are still to some extent influenced by their own personal experience of inflation, because again, neuroscientists feel that the personal experience almost rewires our brain. It has a much bigger impact on us than something we didn't personally experience. And it reminds me of something that happened in the Brexit referendum in the UK, when a leading politician stated, "We've had enough of experts." And it was a controversial statement, but also it captured some aspect of human psychology that we don't like listening to experts because it's much more intangible when an expert talks about figures and statistics. We value much more of a personal experience. So although it got some people riled up, I think it also touched a chord, and many people are skeptical of experts because they value their personal experience more. So what should we do? Should we ignore our personal experiences and always look at the statistical average? Well, I think that's an unrealistic outlook on human nature because, of course, our personal experiences are going to be very important to us. And you can get something from a personal experience you can't get from a more impassionate, impartial look at statistics. But at the same time, it is worth bearing in mind that just because we had one bad experience at one particular time, it doesn't mean that we should base everything on that, because you can just be unlucky. You can have a bad experience and it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have that again. So it's something worth being aware of, but we are very prone to this experience effect, and it can have its advantages because it is important to look at our own experiences, but it's important not to forget that there is a bigger picture, and that just because one thing happened once, it doesn't mean it's always going to happen in the future.